Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where the Commander Clash crew discusses Commander-related topics, and today we're going to be talking about the best ramp cards in Commander, or at least at the play group they were playing at the power level they were playing at, which I would say was kind of like mid-power, casual, not CDH. And yeah, we're just going to be going over every single color and talk about our favorite, most powerful, staple-y, go-to ramp options for each of those colors, what we go for and jam in first. And joining me, as always, for this discussion is Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. How's it going, Seth?
I'm doing well, Tomer. How are you today?
Doing well. I know there's going to be some interesting debates and controversies, minor controversies on some of the lists, so I'm interested in getting into the thick of these things. And then next up, we got the Asian Avenger, a.k.a. Krim. How's it going, Krim?
Yo, what's up, Tomer? It's going.
Good morning. Good morning, Krim. And finally, we got the Bruise Kitchen, a.k.a. Phil. How's it going, Phil?
Hey, everything's pretty warm here in Germany. Otherwise, doing pretty well, but sweating a lot.
And sunshiny. Oh yeah, you don't have AC in Germany, right? Like, that's not a concept. Right. That's unfortunate. And yeah, hello, this is me, Tomer. And yeah, we're going to go into the discussion. But before we jump into the actual cards, one way you can support the podcast, you can like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast, be it YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to it. Just do the equivalent of liking, subscribing there. And the second way you can support the channel is you can head on over to mtggoldfishmerch.com. You can buy our merch. You can buy playmats, deck sleeves, deck boxes, t-shirts, and so much more at mtggoldfishmerch.com. All right, now for the cards. Like I said, we're going to be focusing on colored ramp options. So cards that can only be featured in a white deck, cards that can only be featured in a blue deck, and so on and so forth. And that said, the basis for most ramp packages, regardless of what color you are, especially if you're not in green, are going to be colorless options. So we're not going to be jumping into those for every single color because that would be tedious and repetitive. Just for you know, to acknowledge it, we got Mana Crypt, Sol Ring, Jewel Lotus, all the talismans, Arcane, all the talisman of creativity and all that sort of stuff. All the signets, including the guild signets and arcane signet, and then just like colorless options like Mind Stone, Thought Vessel, and also some of the equipment that ramp as well, sort of the Animus, Dowsing Dagger, Sword of Hearth and Home. These slot into any deck because they are all colorless options, or at least they slot into most decks. The talismans and signets require you to be in at least one color, usually two. But most of them slot into many different decks. But we're not focusing on that. We're going to be talking about, like, if you're in a white deck, what type of ramp options you're going to be doing and whatnot. And speaking of white, Seth, kick it off with your list. What are your top 5 go-to options for ramping in white?
All right, so for mono white, we have number 1 by a huge margin, Smothering Tithe, 4-mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, if they don't pay 2 mana, you get a treasure token. Number 2 is Deep Gnome Terramancer, a relatively new card. 2-mana 2/2 with flash, that whenever 1 or more lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, you get to tutor for planes, put it on the battlefield tapped, only do it once each turn. So this would be your opponent fetches, a rampant growth, anything like that that is not just making their land drop for the turn. Number 3, Archaeomancer's Map, another pretty new card, a 3-mana artifact that says, when it enters the battlefield, you search your library for up to 2 basic planes, reveal them, put them in your hand, and then, when a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if they have more lands than you, you can put a planes, or you can put a land, rather, onto the battlefield from your hand. And then number 4 and 5, essentially the same card, Knight of the White Orchid, Loyal Warhounds. They're both 2-drops. When they ETB, if an opponent has more lands than you, you can tutor up a planes, put it on the battlefield tapped. Loyal Warhound is a 3/1 with Vigilance, and Knight of the White Orchid is a 2/2 with First Strike. But as far as ramping, they essentially do the same thing.
I beg to differ. Knight of the White Orchid is so much better because it gets duels, and they enter untapped.
Yep.
So it's essentially like a 3
it gets
visits.
8 planes.
It gets 8
Okay.
planes, so you can get a dual planes. You could get like a Galdish Shrine or something and put it on the battlefield untapped, which is
Yep.
really good. Loyal Warhound is just a basic planes, and it goes into play tapped. So
Okay,
Knight
so
of the White
there's
Orchid.
some.
And Knight
They
is
are-
better in combat. For the most part.
You think a 2/2 first strike's better than a 3-power non-first striker? I think
With
that's
vigilance.
With
debatable.
vigilance? Yeah.
I
I mean,
I think it's contextual. Contextual, I would say. So sometimes one will be better, sometimes the other.
yeah,
But you
Warhound does trade with like literally everything.
you are right as far as ramping. I guess Knight is a little bit better. Although they both have the same issue, which is inconsistency. Where unless you're playing bounce lands or having Lotus Fields or ways to manipulate your land count, there's going to be games where you just don't have someone with more lands than you. And when Knight of the White Orchid is just a 2/2 or Loyal Warhounds is just a 3/1, they are really bad in Commander. Like that is about as bad as the card is can exist in a Commander deck, I think, when they are not doing their ramp job. So that is my top 5 list, but I know everyone else has a list. I don't know who's next.
Phil, do you have
I-
any differences on Seth?
Yeah, my only difference is I put a Chaomancer's map between Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhound. So Knight is on 3 and Warhound is on 5. A Chaomancer's map on 4. To be honest, I haven't played with a Chaomancer's map yet because it's not on MTGO, but it reads a little bit less. It reads a little boring. It just rams. And I think Knight of the White Orchid, like the first strike is actually very relevant, I think. And getting duels. Like, I think, yeah, a Chaomancer's map just rams. But Knight of the White Orchid is pretty good at wearing equipment. Not that I would usually do something like this, but I'd say I'd switch those two. Otherwise, yeah, Smothering Tide on 1. Deep Gnome Terramancer is interesting. We haven't seen it on Clash yet, but it seems good the better your play group gets. Like, as soon as they play fetches and stuff,
Is it
it
online?
gets pretty wild.
It
It's
is-
not
it
on,
is-
on
is
Magic
it?
Online.
Oh,
I
I
don't
thought it
think
was.
so.
Oh,
I-
I've like been so impressed with that card. It's done silly things. Like I'm the Zedger, I have it in my Zedger deck, and I have more mana than the green player consistently. It's very funny.
I mean-
but
Out of all the cards mentioned on this whitelist, only Deep Gnome Terramancer and Smothering Tide are like relatively guaranteed to get you lands. They're not catch-up ramp. They're the only two that are not catch-up ramp that don't require your opponent to have more lands on the battlefield than you, which is nice. I think that is why they rank very highly on both of our lists.
well, Deep Gnome still requires your opponent to do something, which is
They need
put
to do
lands-
something,
Yeah.
but you can have the most lands at the table and your opponent cracks the fetch and you
Yeah,
still
yeah,
get a
yeah.
land. It's not like,
Yeah,
oh,
you
you
just
gotta be
keep
like
going for
sucking.
value.
The other ones are like, hey, sorry, White, you're really bad at this, so we'll give you a little pity land. Like,
Don't do it too much though. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
ramp too much, or else your
Or you-
things stop working.
Is your white deck actually getting as many lands as everyone else? We can't have that. Like, cut them off. Cut them off.
Wait,
Hey,
I
get
just
ahead.
see Deep Gnome Terramancer doesn't require the opponent to have its own effect put a land into play. So you could actually use, what is it, Field of Ruin, the one that gets every player land.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
correct.
probably the only situation where
You
I
force
play
it.
Field of Ruin.
Although
Right.
the downside is you ramp to unrelated players because everyone gets a
That,
land.
yeah, it's still not good.
So it's
probably.
still a little group
but at
huggy,
least
but
you ramp a bunch.
yeah.
Right. But first, we have to hear Krim's list, and then mine, and then we get into the cards. Krim, what do you got? What's your list?
The list is like pretty similar, just give or take a few ranking differences. But I have Smothering Tide that 1, Knight of the White Orchid, Loyal Warhound, Archaeomancer's Map, and then Deep Gnome Terramancer. Deep Gnome Terramancer, according to how I wrote it, Depth Known. But Deep Gnome Terramancer is a card that I think I just haven't played against enough to really, like, the times I've played against it, it's been pretty solid. I don't have one, but every time I played against it, it's been pretty darn good. I do think I'd rank it higher if I'd seen more of it in play. But I have seen a lot of the Knight of the White Orchids and the Loyal Warhounds. I think it lines up nicely with what Mono White does in that it leaves a body. And then on top of that, it gets you a land. And specifically, Knight getting you any kind of Plains card is really good. Archaeomancers is kind of just okay. It's on there. Like I think Deep Gnome would actually be ranked higher if I just played against it more and gotten more games in against it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a problem that we just don't have access to a Deep Gnome or Archaeomancer's map on Magic Online, and if that's where we get most of our games in, we just won't have a lot of playtesting with them. But I can at least say that I really like Deep Gnome. So for my list, it's almost like, I think it's literally the exact same as Phil. I have Smothering Tithe at number 1, number 2 Deep Gnome Terramancer, 3 is Knight of the White Orchid, 4 Archaeomancer's map, and Loyal Warhound. No new cards. I think we're all pretty unanimous on what our top 5 picks were. It's just the ordering of them. I do have some games with Archaeomancer's map and Deep Gnome Terramancer. I will say I'm absolutely floored by Deep Gnome Terramancer. I think it's like the second best ramp card after Smothering Tithe. And like people have said already, that it doesn't suffer from the catch-up mechanic of other white ramp cards like Knight of the White Orchid. Like, if you ramp too much, you can just shut off your land ramp, your other catch-up cards, which kind of sucks. It makes it a little bit inconsistent. Whereas Deep Gnome Terramancer, it's inconsistent because you have to wait for your opponent to do something, but it's so easy, especially if there's like any green player at the table, you're going to trigger it so much. And then you can just find yourself ahead on lands over the green players, especially if people are playing a lot of fetch lands and stuff. So I rank it very highly. Archaeomancer's map, also not available on Magic Online, but oh man. I feel like it's basically burgeoning, but you pay 2 extra mana, but you get 2 lanes into your hand, guaranteed. So even if you're not ramping with it, you're still getting 2 lanes. It's like a poor man's divination, but the downside is poor man's divination is the low end. The high end is you ramp out a lot, which is also really nice. So, yeah.
I'm surprised that some people have Archaeomancer's map below some of the catch-up cards. Like, the way I see it is, like, Smothering Tithe is way by itself in number 1. Deep Gnome is clearly number 2 in its own tier. And then I would say Archaeomancer's map should rank above Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhounds, just because the floor is okay. Like, the floor is, I get 2 lands. I drew 2 cards. Yes, it's not ramping me, but I'm doing something. When the floor on Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhounds, like, oh, it's so painfully low. You're not going to convince me that getting a 2-2 or getting a 3-1 is just, like, exciting in a game of Commander. Like, I know you could put an equipment on it or skull clamp it or something, but still, like, ugh. So I don't know. I feel like cards that do something, when it comes to white, cards that do something every time have gotta have more value than cards that are just like, sometimes I'm good and sometimes I am the worst card in your deck.
I mean, but like, I think I value the body more. I think that's the difference. Archaeomancer's map, I think, is not anything exciting otherwise. I mean, you get the 2 planes no matter what, which is nice. But I think in a mono, like, if I'm thinking mono white, like that kind of game plan, I think the bodies matter more.
They're such bad bodies, though. They're like the lowest tier of bodies.
Well, okay, Knight is, I think, respectable. Loyal Warhound, the body's not great. That's obviously why I rank it lower. But at the same time, I think mono white doesn't care if it's just a 1-1.
So just having any body makes it worth it.
Usually.
I really value... I'm addicted to the turn 2 Knight of the White Orchid ramp. It's essentially a 3 visits because it gets any planes, it puts it onto battlefield untapped, and it sets you up for playing like a 4-drop on turn 3. So the fact that it's a turn 2 ramp card is really important to me. It's only not a turn 2 ramp card if you went first in the game, but that's only a 25% chance. I mean, that does suck when it happens, obviously. But I don't know. I always get excited when I see Knight of the White Orchid in my opener. Like, that is I've had so many good experiences with it that I rank it pretty high. And I do like that it equips you can just hold the sword or whatever really easily on it. And it is a body, so you stop early aggression a little bit. So I don't know. The map's very good. I don't know. It's between the two. I know they're both. I think they're both better than Little Warhound. That's for sure. But like, which one is better than the other? I don't know. I think the White Knight is a little bit better, but meh.
It reminds me of Abriel Razor a little bit, where, if you slam it on turn 2 and you're not playing first, like, life is really good, but when you peel it on turn 8, when you're hoping to, like, draw some cards or wrath the board, you're very sad, usually.
It just gets you 2 lands. It
gets a draw to you.
Basic lands.
It thins the deck. Come on now. Y'all underestimate. I'm surprised Prim doesn't have that number 1.
I do like that.
Number 1 overall for deck thinning.
Can't block an attack deck. So we're basically like, or just nitpicking at this point, like which one we would say is better or worse. But like, it is interesting to note that we all pick the same 5 cards, right? Yep. I guess because we went through it so fast. Seth, you did mention you wanted to have like Dowsing Dagger as a white card. I guess this would be a good time to mention it.
I initially had Dowsing Dagger on the argument that it's way better in white than most colors, because white is the color of equipment and the color of ways to find equipment and the color of cheap creatures. I wouldn't just jam Dowsing... Richard would, but I wouldn't just jam Dowsing Dagger in any random green deck or any random black deck or blue deck. But in a random white deck, it just tends to really work with what your white decks are going to be doing. So I think that equipment ramp goes way up in value. I would say, personally, behind probably Deep Known Terramancer. I think Smothering Tide, Deep Known Terramancer are really, really good. Below that, that's where you would start to have Dowsing Daggers, sort of Hearth and Homes, sort of the Animus, various equipment that, like, when you attack, you tutor it out, or when you hit combat damage, you tutor out a land. Dowsing Dagger flips into a land that makes 3 mana. So I think in mono white in specific, those cards go way up in value compared to the rest of the colors. But it is true that they aren't technically white cards. They are really colorless cards. Then you get in the weird situation where, if we're not counting like Soul Rings, which is obviously maybe even better than Smothering Tide in your mono white deck, should we really count cards like that? But they are very strong because of white's equipment theme.
I mean, that's fair. It's like honorary white cards.
Yeah, they're
I
not
run them in
technically
basically.
white, but
Yeah, I still run them in basically any non-green deck because I'm with Richard on that they're very, very powerful. But you're right. The white has specifically a lot of tutoring for equipments and can equip equipments for free too, with stuff like Arden and Knight of Pure Steel Paladin and stuff like that. So there is additional synergy there in white that other colors don't really have as much. But yeah, we'll be moving on from white to blue, and we actually have a little bit more differences here. So Phil, let's start with you. What's your list from 1 to 5?
So first of all, I want to mention that the color that is most reliant on playing ramp artifacts like mana rocks is definitely blue. Like whenever I build a blue deck, first thing I do is load up with 2 mana rocks. So just keep that in mind, because the rest of the blue options for ramp are pretty slim. So at number 1, we have High Tide. I think the only like ritual/ramp spell most people think of in blue. It's for 1 blue mana. It says, until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds 2 to their mana pools, a second blue to their mana pool. So it doubles up your islands for a turn, which to me is the most guaranteed and big way to ramp in blue. Like when you want to cheat out a big Kraken or something, that's probably the way to go besides mana rocks. Then we got you can see that ramp is hard in blue. We got on number 2, we got Mana Drain, a counter spell that gives you the mana cost of the spell in your next upkeep as colorless mana. Next main phase. So you pretty much steal the mana costs for a spell to ramp with it. It's very strong, but it's reliant on you having open mana, countering something. It's like the whole counter aspect doesn't really make it Like, you really don't want to use it for ramping as much as you want to use it for countering, I guess. Unless you load it up with other counter spells in your deck, then you can just fire it off to ramp.
The Crim special.
Yeah, thinking of Crim, you would probably think, well, that's the best value, and I got 10 more counter spells. I usually run
exactly.
like
I just do
1,
I
2, 3?
need the mana for this one or
Yeah.
not? If yes, I'll drain it. If not, I'll use another one. Counter
At
spell
number
52.
3, we have Baral, Chief of Compliance, Ethereum Sculptor, and other effects that make certain card types cheaper. I just grouped them together here. Baral and Ethereum Sculptor are both 2 mana, 1 and a blue. One makes instant and sorceries cost less. The Ethereum Sculptor makes artifacts cost less. It's technically ramp. You pretty much get a discount on any everything, but you have to build your deck around it, which with these two types, like instant sorceries and artifacts, that's usually a blue thing, so they work pretty well in blue, but they don't necessarily... Yeah, I mean, it makes everything cheaper. I guess that's also ramp,
I mean,
but it's not as...
Technically, it's Supply Llama now, by the way, Phil. Just so you know, it's yeah.
Oh.
Ethereum Sculptor is an archaic term. It's now Supply Llama.
Oh, because
Oh, yeah,
for
Llama?
kids.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
What?
such a weird choice for this card. Yeah,
Fortnite is here now, Phil. Come on. Come on, Phil.
Oh my
up with
god,
the
it is
times,
a supply
Phil.
llama.
Okay, at number 4, we got a card that I actually play a lot in blue decks. Not saying that this is a good ramp spell, it's just what you have to do in blue. It's Midnight Clock. It's a 3-mana rock that gets an hour counter at the beginning of each counter upkeep, and then you get a wheel effect once it has 12 counters on it. So you pick up your graveyard and hand shuffle it into your library and draw 7 new cards. This one is, while it works pretty well in Commander because there's a lot of upkeeps, you have to make sure that you're actually playing your cards in your hand before this happens. Like, Crim would probably not like this card too much if he
I love
keeps
this
up
card.
mana and would... Oh, okay. But sometimes I feel like the Midnight Clock is working against me, and I think, oh, I gotta make sure I cast my spells before
Yeah,
I
I got a
wheel.
vomit out my hand.
Please,
Yeah,
I never
but
get to wheel
I'm
with
on
the
the
midnight
clock.
It always gets blown
But
up.
That's a pretty good problem to have, though. Like, a wheel is usually good for you. And if not, at least you drew 7 cards. The problem with the card is that it's cost 3 mana, which I like my mana rocks to cost 2 mana. But you can't be picky in blue. And talking about not being picky, I never played this card, and if it doesn't have extra synergies, I probably never will, but I guess it ramps. Dreamscape Artists. It's a 2-mana 1/1 that lets you pay 3 mana, discard a card, sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So you pretty much cast a Harrow without casting a spell. It's a spell shaper. Yeah, that's pretty much land ramp, but it's at a very clunky cost and body. So I guess it's the only way to ramp lands in blue, which is very unique, and I think it is.
I think it might
I
be.
don't,
It
no, I don't
probably
think
on
it's
this list.
that steep of a cost, is what I mean.
Oh, yeah, it's a Harrow, right? But you have to... I don't know, I can't really imagine...
It's a
This
it's a
being the
Harrow
best-
that you spent 2 cards on, and then you need haste, or else you have to wait an entire turn cycle to activate it, and you
Right.
spent 2 extra mana to cast your 2-card Harrow that has
If
summoning
you-
sickness.
Want to discard... Wait,
Well,
if
that's
you want
exactly
to discard
it.
a card... Oh, yeah, okay. So if you can make any use of this ability besides just saying, oh, I want to ramp by 1, like if you make use of the card discarding or sacrificing a land, which is pretty unusual in blue, but hey, you do you. If that's the right card for you, that's a pretty unique one, and it ramps. That's number 5. Number 6 would be even worse, probably. I don't even know. Gotta say, though, looking at the other cards here on these lists, I tried to rank my cards by the ramp factor. Like, there's other cards that technically ramp or accelerate you, but they do other things way better. No, to be fair, Mana Drain is on the line as well. But it ramps so hard that it's good again. But otherwise, I probably... Yeah, Mana Drain is already on the line, but it's so good that I had to include it here. Yeah, that's my top 5.
All right. My list is of course going to have Mana Drain number 1. That's the best thing that can like ramp in the most blue playstyle possible. And then High Tide is another good one, but I feel like very rarely am I ever just high tiding. It's usually when I'm about to go off. So I put it on here because it is a very powerful spell, but oftentimes I feel like this isn't ramp. It's just I'm gonna go off. It's a combo piece. But then we get into Fairy Temporal Archmage, which is 4 blue. It's the Planeswalker one where the +1 you look at the top 2 cards, you put one in the hand, pitch the other. But then the minus is -1 on Teferi, and it's untap 4 permanents. So if this resolves, you can just untap 4. So you played this for what it could be like 2 mana, and then every turn after that, you get to just start really pulling far ahead with untapping of 4 lands. This card is an amazing Planeswalker, and it, obviously it's 6 mana, so it has to be. Of course, the ultimate is that you get an emblem where you can activate your Planeswalkers at instant speed. Which is very good. But the main thing about this is that you get to untap 4 permanents, and usually this is also a part of a combo. Like if you're able to like double the activation of Planeswalkers, you flicker this or something, and then you get to just kind of infinitely keep untapping 4 mana. But I think this is just a great powerful card on its own as a -1 untap 4 permanents. So, probably one of the best things that you could probably do in blue, because it's also still a Planeswalker, it's card advantage, it's not just, like a Dreamscape artist, right? Yeah, it's a bit of everything all in one. So I love this, and it's rare for blue to have, like a ramping effect like that. So, then, I of course have Dreamscape artist, because it is technically ramping. It is technically ramping, okay? Now, I do think that the discard a card, then you sack a land. It is a Harrow. It comes at a cost, but it does ramp, and some decks can't afford to throw away a land. It is technically ramp. I'm just saying.
Is this how low we have to go?
Blue has to dig a little deeper.
This is the fourth best slot.
Look,
really?
not everything has cultivate, all right? This is the next thing that blue has. And then,
this desperate?
It's not great, I'll admit. It's pretty awful when you look at it, but it is ramp, and in very corner pocket situations.
All right.
Yes, it does what you want it to do. And then
I respect you, all right? I'm just judging you silently.
Look, I get it. It's not the best. But maybe the next card should have been ranked higher, but this one is technically more niche, because then blue has a lot of niche mana dorks, if you would. Like you have the ones that add mana towards artifacts and or instants and sorcery spells, but specifically the card I've got on here is Grand Architect. 1 blue, other blue creatures you get, blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Pay a blue, target artifact creature becomes blue until end of turn, and then tap an untapped blue creature you control, add 2 colorless, spend this mana only to cast or activate abilities of artifacts. So this a little more narrow, but if you are going to play any of the mana dorks, this is really good for it. And on top of that, it allows your like little mini blue dorks to just play your like arcane signets and all of that. So this also has an anthem. So it's not like just an awful mana dork. It does other things on top of it. So usually turning an artifact creature into blue can be relevant, as you get to turn something into a blue color, which makes it so that you could, I don't know, give it protection from blue or something like that. Or you never know. I mean,
it's basically lets you turn your artifact creatures for 1 blue, turn them into mana dorks that net you 1 colorless, right? You're turning 1 blue into 2 colorless. Right. So that's good.
And then you can pump your team with this. Look, blue's got to dig deep, all right? That's all I'm saying. Blue's got to dig real deep.
All right. Fair. Seth, what do you got? I see a card. It's fine.
Okay. Wait, am I supposed to be going through my list? I'm so confused.
Wait, fine. I'll go for my list. Fine. I'll go through my list. We'll keep the order.
Okay.
Top mana drain. I agree with Grim here. The fact this card is just silly. It's a silly card. The fact that you get like a straight up no conditions counter spell. You counter something, and chances are in Commander, the thing you want to be countering is something usually expensive, right? Like you're not usually going to be being like snap countering a 2-drop unless it's Dockside, but I mean Dockside is its own thing. But like, you know, the big haymakers that people are trying to go for are going to be like 5 mana, 6 mana, maybe even 7 mana. And you snap that off, not only do you deny them that spell, but then you get that huge ramp potential on next turn. And I think this card is, yeah, really good. Like obviously it's always good. Like even if you get a 2-drop, you know, if the 2-drop was worth countering, then you countered it. And then you get a little bit of ramp, but like you always get some ramp, and you can just use it to ramp you heavier. Like you could just ignore 2 drops and then snap it off on any 5 drop somebody's casting, and you're good. And then High Tide, you have to be very heavy on blue, obviously because you need the islands for it to be good. But basically, if you have like 3 islands on the battlefield, you spend 1 blue mana to High Tide, you're going up at least like 2 mana, possibly much more. So I think High Tide's very good. Then I got a card that is going to make people very salty. It's Urza Lord High Artificer, just like Krim said with Grand Architect. And also how Phil said about like sometimes blue is really good at ramping towards specific things, and those specific things are instants and sorceries, and or artifacts. Those are the 2 things that blue is actually good at. And guess what? Urza is really good at doing that too. So for people who don't know what Urza is, I'm so sorry for introducing you to this, or your playgroup rather. This is a 4-mana human artificer, legendary creature, 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token that's gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. But the most important thing for this particular card is you can tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 blue mana. And you can pay 5 mana to shuffle your library, exile a top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. We're just going to ignore the fact that it makes like a huge token beater and the fact that it turns into card advantage. And just focus on the fact that you have a 4-drop that lets you tap all your untapped artifacts for blue. So it comes with an artifact, so you are immediately making 1 blue off this every single turn. You can tap your treasures, which normally have to sacrifice themselves for mana. No, you can just tap them for blue. Your clues, tap them for blue. Your food tokens, tap them for blue. Blue is also really good, or artifacts are really good at making artifact tokens, like 1/1s and stuff, like your Psy Master Thopterus, your Efficient Construction, your Mirrodin Besieged, all these things that are like whenever you cast an artifact, you make a 1/1 artifact creature token. Those all tap for blue now. It's like Grand Architect, but what if Grand Architect was made in 2020? So that's basically the card. I think it's very strong. And then I have one.
It's so much better than Grand Architect because the mana can be spent on anything. Like that's a big upside to Urza. Like it's not, you can only spend the mana on artifacts. You need artifacts to make mana, but you can cast counter spells, instant sorceries. Like that's the huge upside, I think.
It's also not limited to creatures either. You can just tap any artifact. Yeah. So it's just like, your food, your clue, your treasures. It's a silly card. And then it's also a finisher because your construct punches people in the face, and you can spend all that mana on the card advantage engine and then staple to it. It's just so silly. Why?
I actively try to forget about Urza. So,
oh God.
or I would probably put that over Grand Architect, but. Yes.
Yeah. I think the downside is the only downside is if you're playing it for just the ramp, people will try to kill you immediately, and justified, honestly. So
and it is justified, usually.
Usually. Is Urza gonna do that from the 99? I know if you play Urza as your commander, I'm gonna try to kill you, but if you just randomly jam it in a blue deck, is that still so scary?
Look, I see what you're trying to do, and I am gonna kill you.
I have not put it in my Shurikai Mech Titan deck because I'm afraid that I'm just going to get hated out for good reason.
don't you
But,
like,
like-
the main? Yeah, exactly, Tomer. There
Yeah.
is a reason. There is a reason. What
Yeah, I mean,
the reason being is that even if it is like example, if I just play an Edgar Markov in my 99, people will still punch me because I'm playing an Edgar Markov, and the bad memories of a Commander version
Yeah.
of Edgar Markov
There's
will
no
scar
Windsor
people into
Reverse.
killing you. The reason is there is no reason other than that I just don't want to see that card anymore.
Yeah, I get the same problem in Lonis. Like, I don't own an Urza. It's also pretty expensive, and I definitely need the old border one. But yeah, I'm pretty scared in Lonis that, first of all, I go infinite pretty much right away. And people will also really try to kill me because of, his other abilities are just absurd. So I'd prefer Jaheira, for example, which pretty much does the super slim version of this. Tokens you control tap for green, which is way fairer. It doesn't get around haste and stuff. Urza is just absurd beyond the ramping part. It's just, it didn't make my list, but it probably should. It's better than Dreamscape Artist, I guess. But it's
yeah, Dreamscape. This is
so much.
okay. You all put your Dreamscape artists on the top 5, just snubbing Urza on the way. Like,
Technically, it is ramp.
I have a rant on Dreamscape artists. There's some
I'm just
diehard
saying.
Dreamscape artists out there, right? There's some diehard ones ever since like 2011 when I've been bad mouthing this card for over a decade now. So yes, if you have some like graveyard synergy / discard synergy, then an overcosted discard outlet might be what you're looking for if you really want to play low powered. But if you're like, hey, this is a Harrow, all right, Harrow is what this card does. You have to discard a card, or you have to sacrifice a land, and you go up 2 lands, and it costs 1 card and it's instant speed. This is like, imagine if Harrow required you to discard a card and sacrifice a land, and it had like
Banger.
suspend
Love it.
1, and it could be countered by just like somebody spending a removal spell or a board wipe incidentally. Like, this card is so much worse than Harrow. It's not like Harrow's like,
removal
I mean,
on this, Tomer. Who's going to remove this?
I would just to see the light of hope in your eyes fade.
They never had the light to begin with. They're casting Dreamscape artists. So you can't snuff out that light, son.
Like, if you're building around it, maybe. But no, actually, no.
With Harrow, you're discarding the Harrow, so I think it literally is Harrow in terms of like card advantage, because you are spending a card when you cast the Harrow. You're down
This
1
gets
card
a
in your
body.
hand.
You're
It is
shaping.
No,
definitely a
because
drawback.
this requires you to discard a card, and sacrifice a land to get
But
the
if
Harrow
you-
effect.
Yeah,
But if you
that's
cast
the
Harrow,
same as
you're
Harrow.
throwing a card away from your hand
Right.
into the graveyard. It's the Harrow,
But
You
Dreamscape is a
shape the
card
spell
itself.
into Harrow.
but it stays on the
Dreamscape-
battlefield.
Sure,
Yeah.
But it's
Still,
on
but
but it's a 1/2. Like, well, okay, I have it
And-
on the battlefield.
Hey,
That's a
oh,
liability.
It's a 1/2.
And if
Oh
I got
my
you
It's
God.
a
removal,
It's a
trash
1/1.
I
card. Oh,
got
Everyone
I'm
was-
sorry. I almost gave it too much credit. It's a
was-
liability on the battlefield. If only it was an instant. If this was like straight up a color shifted Harrow, I would be like, this card's actually pretty gas.
Oh yeah,
I would put it on my top 5 even if it was just straight up color
especially
shifted
as
Harrow.
instant. Yeah.
I do want to point out that everyone was going crazy over Knight of the White Orchid being a 2/2. Oh, it's a body. Oh, it's so good. And then it comes
Wait,
to
the two,
Dreamscape
if
artists.
only
were like,
Dreamscape artists.
1/2.
I will say-
that's underpowered.
If it
So the
ETB'd,
mono white body matters more in mono white. All right, I'm just saying. But
if this
also,
is ETB Harrow, I'd be on board.
Dreamscape
card
artist
slaps.
isn't. It's not good. But Blues
But-
Ramp isn't good. So I don't think it's. I have it on my list as
You
well.
have it
just
on
'cause,
your
like,
list too,
there's
but at least you
not-
have Urza.
But there's not good. There's not a lot of good options, especially if you're trying to avoid things that aren't generically ramp. Like Blue has some
Urza.
options, like the brawls and stuff that ramp for certain things. But if you just want stuff that can go in any deck, Blue
Yeah.
has not much outside of Anorax.
Does not. I guess I'll finish it by having one that you can put in any deck, but it's also contentious in its own way. Thieving Skydiver. I consider this ramp, but it is definitely. I can totally understand if people would not classify it as ramp. Thieving Skydiver, 2 mana, Merfolk Rogue, Kicker. Kicker can't be Kicker X can't be 0. Flying. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with mana value X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So you have to spend at least 3 mana on this because if you want to kick it. But basically, you can spend like 3 mana and then steal target player's Sol Ring. So you get a 2/1 body with flying. You kick it for X equals 1, and you steal somebody's Sol Ring, which is pretty amazing. You spend 2 mana, you steal somebody's talisman or signets or anything. And since everybody's playing Mana Rocks, I've never had a situation where I have a Thieving Skydiver and no Mana Rock to steal. So I always just feel like I either steal a Sol Ring or I steal like a Mana Rock. Sometimes I've even stolen, I think I've stole Richard's like Dowsing Dagger or something with this before, and he's done that to me before. So it's all good. It's all gravy. But yeah, it's not actually ramp, but it is a way to ramp. It's not, on paper by itself, it does not say ramp, okay? But in a real game of Commander, it does ramp. So
Dreamscape Artists.
This is better than Dreamscape Artists. Are you kidding me?
I'm not here to argue if it is better
It's like
or not.
10 times better.
But
ETB
Dreamscape Artists
steals
is
Sol
at
Ring?
least ramp.
It's at least garbage. That's what it is.
But ramp.
In practice, by turn 3 or 4, Thieving Skydiver can always beat ramp if you wanted to. The odds of like no one having a Mana Rock to steal by the time you can kick it is like so low.
And in practice, Dreamscape Artists is going to be dead before it activates.
Who's killing it?
No,
I'm
no
just
one's
curious.
gonna kill.
I'm
Who's
killing
gonna
it.
kill
I'm very
that?
curious
With
if
my
someone
Spike
saw a
Field
Dreamscape
Hazard.
Artist.
I'm going to kill a Spike Field Hazard. Send a message. And then I'm just going to finish it off with me. Font of Magic. This is just like Baral, except it's a new enchantment, and I've been really impressed by it. 4 mana enchantment. Instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. So unlike Baral, this is not like a 2-drop that you just play before a commander and you get value. You have to play your commander first, or else it doesn't do anything. But this is like really, really good in Spellslinger decks that have like a low cost commander like Baral or as partners or something like that. So I've just been impressed by it. But yeah, it's not like way above Baral or anything. I just wanted to mention it. But yeah. Enough about my...
There's also a bunch of those, right? Arcane Melee and
Jace's
Sanctum. There's a
Curious
bunch of
Homunculus.
stuff in that range that does similar things. But
Except for, I think some of them do more. I think Font of Magic's pretty bad.
There's
I
like
think it's pretty
Arcane
bad too,
Melee.
but-
It makes all instants and sorceries, but it's like 5 mana
But
enchantment.
Jace's
It makes
Sanctum at least gives you, or one of them allows you to
Scry
scry.
ones.
Yeah.
yeah, Jace's Sanctum lets you scry as you cast stuff. But I mean, the upside of Font of Magic, I guess, is if you cast your commander a bunch, it could be like a 3 mana discount or a 4 mana discount. So anyway, my list: Mana Drain number 1, Thieving Skydiver number 2, Urza number 3, High Tide number 4, Dreamscape Artist number 5. I'm not super impressed with High Tide. Blue's options are so narrow, but for kind of the reasons Kurt mentioned before, like, it's hard for me to think of it as a ramp spell. Normally, the only time I play it is when I'm trying to do something unfair and, like, storm off or something. It's not a card I just, like, think, oh, I got a bunch of islands, so I'm in a High Tide. Maybe I should, I don't know. Maybe, do you guys play it that way? Do you just, like, be like, I'm a mono blue deck, I might as well High Tide, and maybe it'll do something? Or are you trying to do specific, like, big turn, time spiral, untap my lands, like, shenanigans if you're going to be playing it?
I'm definitely
only
trying to
time
like chain off like a bunch of spells of
Yeah.
fire. Like maybe like I don't have the win, but I'm about to lose, so I'm going to just cast High Tide to fish for my win con, right?
Only in mono blue though, right? The only time I played High Tide was in Garuda, and which is not mono blue by the way, but there I noticed the downside. And in Jin-Gitaxias, which is actually a good place for it because it costs 7 mana. But in Garuda, I'm not known for playing much basic lands or islands. Yeah, that really hurts. Make sure you have actual islands in your deck if you cast High Tide. But if you have all islands and play it on turn like 5 and get 8, cast an 8-drop, that's ramp right there. I mean, it's more ramp than Thieving Skydiver, I'd say.
I mean,
although I'm not gonna tell anybody not to play Thieving Skydiver, but
to be fair, High Tide, like in mono blue decks, they usually have like Archaeomancers, Mystic Sanctuary. So I guess you can use it as a quick burst, and then with the plan of buying it back later. But if someone eats your yard up, that's gonna feel pretty bad.
I think it also exemplifies just how bad Blue's ramp is, because there's actually like a black version called Bubbling Muck that like no one ever thinks about or talks about, and is definitely not any of our lists. So we all have like High Tide pretty high on our blue list, and it would not even be in the conversation if it was in another color. Honestly, with blue, Mana Drain and Thieving Skydiver are really the only two cards that I can really say with a straight face that I would play in most blue decks. Once you get beyond that, it's like, oh, in this specific deck, I might play this card, or this specific deck. But I think those are the only two, and then it's just Mana Rocks, right? Like, how many cards on your list would you just jam in a generic deck? You don't have any theme or synergy. Like, are there any that you play in blue outside of Mana Drain in specific and maybe Skydiver?
I mean, I would say Skydiver. Yeah, outside of Mana Drain, Skydiver, Teferi.
Really? Do you just jam that in a... I don't play Teferi in generic decks. It doesn't
I didn't know
too
it
much.
existed.
I worry too much about it just dying, because I'm gonna... kind of like Urza, if someone plays that Teferi, my immediate thought is, okay, you're gonna go infinite with it, so I need to kill you or kill Teferi. Because isn't that all that Teferi normally does, is go like Chain Veil infinite or whatever?
It can go Chain Veil infinite, but it's also just a solid game like card in a like blue game plan, right? I'm able to now hold up Aetherize or maybe Engulf the Shores, right? So like, is it perfectly untaps 4 mana, and that's assuming we're just untapping the islands, not like 3 Mana Rocks in an island, because then some of those Mana Rocks could be like a Mana Crypt, a Soul Ring, or something like that, right?
True. I think it's still trying to kill you.
Know it existed. It seems scary, but it's also expensive. Is a 6-drop even considered ramp? Like, what are you ramping into? Another 6-drop?
So at that point, once you have 6 mana, I can now essentially have 10 mana on the next turn.
Yeah.
So you let me, and then that's assuming that I don't have a way to activate his ability twice.
It's also very good with High Tide.
It will also be with High Tide. Yeah,
Rylan?
Sure.
What? Popping off?
Yeah, it seems a bit like the High Tide thing, where you use it to go off rather than what you would consider ramping. But I mean, we're in blue here. It's
like I think Teferi is a good card, though. Like, it is something that will ramp you, like if you need it, right? With additional mana. I play it in a mono blue deck. I play it in a non-blue deck. I mean, a non-monocolor deck. I play it in any deck that has blue, pretty much. If I want Planeswalkers, just because of how good that minus is.
Is it on Magic Online?
Yeah.
Huh.
Like,
yeah,
just a generic blue deck.
Seen it.
I think it's just Mana Drain and Thieving Skydiver for me. But I mean, like, if I'm in blue, like, aren't you almost always going to be like Spellslinger or Artifact? So the two primary blue themes. So then the mana discount stuff are pretty good. Or if you're an Artifact, even better. You're just Urzaing it up and living high on life.
Just the control color too, I guess. Like, if you just want to draw go and counter all of everyone's things and make them sad.
That helps.
Yeah, Crim never
helps
ramps. So yeah.
I mean, that's what I imagine Crim does with Teferi, is you can play it and like actually cast stuff main phase and still have your mana up for your counter spells. Yeah.
That's precisely why I play it.
That's literally it. All right. But we got to move on because we have 3 more colors to go on. So Crim, kick it off with your list. All right. What's your top 5?
So for black, I have Cabal Coffers, Crick, Crypt Gas.
You have to read them out, though.
Cabal Coffers, right. You all know this one. You add a black for every swamp you control. Obviously, on its own, it's usually not great. But if you have something like Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, then it just becomes this huge chunk of mana. And then, of course, you have Crick, which is 4 and then 3 Phyrexian black mana, so you can pay 2 life or tap black. And then all your black spells, you turn all the black pips into Phyrexian black pips. So you can pay 2 life. So example, Damnation would be 2 and 2 Phyrexian black, so it could be 4 life and 2 mana. So I consider that a huge discount. And then on top of that, every time it has lifelink, and every time you cast a black spell, it gains a 1/1 counter. So you'll gain a lot of that life back. And then on top they have Crypt Gas, Nirkana Revenant, which is kind of doing what the Cabal Coffers thing does, but on a body instead. So every swamp now adds for like 2 black mana. And then you also have Dark Ritual, which is 1 mana instant, add triple black. And then of course you've got Pitiless Plunderer and which is a 1/4 whenever a creature dies. I believe, is it yours or your your opponents.
Only your creatures with Pitiless Plunder, yeah.
Whenever your creature dies, you get a treasure, which is pretty easy in mono black because you have so many ways to like sacrifice your own things, oftentimes to your benefit. And then you have Revel in Riches. Now this one is whenever a creature an opponent has. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you get a treasure. So it's a 5-mana enchantment. That's pretty solid, especially in like more of like hard control decks. It just kind of becomes a win con on its own. So many times you see just like where I'll play it, and then I'm just like in a board wipe tribal deck, and that'll usually get me there.
Sometimes your opponent just board wipe and you win the game on your upkeep.
That also.
Who would do
that? I like that.
All right. I guess for my list, it's the same cards except for one difference. So I have Cryptghast and Necronomicon Revenant on the top. I think Cryptghast is better than Revenant because Cryptghast is 4, where Revenant is 6.
With Extort.
And it has Extort. Yeah, so
Extort doesn't ramp, though.
It doesn't, but it's a good way to like spend your excess mana that Cryptghast is giving you, which is nice. Then Cabal Coffers, Dark Ritual. I still run Dark Ritual in most black decks because just ramping out something 2 turns early is nice. And then Pitiless Plunderer in sacrifice decks. I think this card is very, very, very good. Like one of the best cards in a sacrifice deck. And then the last one, I put a question mark around it. I saw that Seth also put it there, so I was like, yeah, I kind of agree. This is Black Market Connections. It's a brand new card from Battle for Baldur's Gate. Loading. Okay, there it is. 3 mana, black enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose one or more. Option 1 is create a treasure token, you lose 1 life. Option 2, draw a card, you lose 2 life. And option 3 is create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with changeling, you lose 3 life. So you can choose between, you can choose up to 1 to 3 options. You can lose 1 life and just make a treasure, and that's your ramp each turn. Kind of slow. But the nice thing about it is that it comes with other abilities too. So you get to also be drawing a card, and you can make a body as well. If you lose up to 6 life, you get to do all 3, which is really sweet. I don't think it's like the best ramp option in black, but the fact that it has that flexibility makes it very, very good, and that's why I kind of put it here. Like, I don't think it's like the best in the top 5 for black, but like the flexibility is what puts it as like a complete package for me. But I also see that Seth has it too, so yes.
I do have it on my list as well. I also like the flexibility. I think that's really huge. I like cards that I am comfortable putting in most of my decks. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So for me, Cabal Coffers, number 1. Also, shout out to Magus of the Coffers, which I don't play nearly as much, but it's the same thing on a body. Cryptghast, Arcana Revenant, number 2. I have Black Market Connections, number 3, because I've just found that card to be really impressive pretty much every time I play it, in part because of the ramp, but in part because it does so much. Like, it's also a Phyrexian Arena. It's also making tokens. So it's a card I'm happy to play in pretty much any of my black decks. I have Dark Ritual at number 4, although I feel kind of bad about it because I don't really play Dark Ritual. I don't think Dark Ritual is honestly good unless you're storming or something. I don't just play it in black decks to be like, oh, one shot, I got there a little bit quicker. I don't like my ramp to be temporary unless I'm trying to like win the game the turn I cast it. So I could see an argument for putting something else, like maybe Black Market Connections. I think I play more often than Dark Ritual, which is a 5-mana enchantment. When a creature dies, it gets a counter. And the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you get to add a black mana for each counter on it. I think I play that more than I actually play Dark Ritual. And then I have Revel in Riches at number 5, which I learned it's very easy to make a lot of treasures with that. As Tomer said, sometimes you wrath, sometimes your opponents wrath into it. But really in Commander, creatures die. Like, there's so many creatures dying, trading off in combat, dying to target removal, dying to sweepers, that Revel in Riches makes a lot of treasures in a typical Commander game. And then it might win you the game. But even if you're not trying to win the game with it, the amount of mana that it makes, if you're playing a deck with a bunch of removal, I think is enough to have it on your top 5 list, at least for me.
So I have a question about Revel in Riches. I've never been too hot on it because I was always afraid that like it kind of puts a target on your back because it says you win the game. And people are like, oh no, he's gonna win the game off this card. And it's like, don't worry, I'm trying to use it as ramp. But it's like, no, you can win the game off it, hypothetically. And I guess it does happen from time to time. But like, if you are using it as ramp, I'm always afraid of that, like trying to use it fairly, quote unquote. And there's another card that costs the same amount. It's older. It used to be played a lot, but it's called Black Market. Just Black Market, not Black Market Connections. Also 5 mana enchantment. And it says, whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on it. And then at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add black for each charge counter on Black Market. So it basically does the same thing as the Revel Enriches mana make treasure, except it does it more efficiently because it gives you that mana every single time it's your pre-combat main phase. Whereas Revel Enriches, like, if one creature dies, you get one treasure, and then once you use that treasure, that's it. Whereas Black Market, you get one charge counter, and then every subsequent pre-combat main phase, you get that one mana. And so if like 5 thing dies, like, it will give you much more mana, and it doesn't have that you win the game clause. But isn't that better? If you're trying to put in a ramp slot, wouldn't you prefer Black Market over Revel Enriches?
I mean, I had Black Market kind of as my number 6 card because it's the same mana cost, but legitimately I feel like the upside though is that if, Revel gets removed, you have all the treasures still lying around. So it's kind of, I actually prefer the treasures over the constant re-upping of the mana when it comes to Black Market. However, because I assume that all these things are getting removed anyway, somehow, some way, because there's so much incidental artifact enchantment hate attached to cards now. So I would rather have a treasure kind of sit there and until I need it, absolutely need it. Whereas this is all in on the Black Market card, and on top of that, creatures dying, you getting treasures, and you just happen to also have a way to win the game on top of it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think the win the game I consider an upside. I'm sure it draws some amount of hate, but it just seems so easy in Commander for there to be 10 creatures on the battlefield and a single Wrath to turn this into almost a 2-card combo in a lot of scenarios where it's, especially in Black, which is so good at late game ramping and making big amounts of mana once the game gets going. It's pretty practical to play that and also follow it up with a Damnation or a Toxic Deluge and just be like, all right, your board is swept. I have more than 10 treasures. Deal with me if you can before it comes back around to me or you're all dead. And I just wrath your board too, so how are you going to deal with me? So
That's true.
I like it. I like the upside of it, I think. Even though I also, I mentioned replacing Dark Ritual with Black Market because I'm not a big Dark Ritual fan.
Fair. Okay, the other question I had was Keurig. Have we all been sleeping on Keurig? Because I think Krim is the only one who mentioned it.
I just forgot about it. Did anybody ever see it in a 99 though?
I've only played it as a commander. As a commander, it's like a stormy combo deck. You burn through your deck.
It once.
I have a hard time
in 99.
I have a hard time envisioning playing it as just a ramp spell. Is it worth it? So it's 7 mana.
Well, it's 4 mana.
I guess 4 mana and 6 life.
I've never paid 7 mana for the card. I promise you that.
But then you also have to, you got to untap with it, right? Or you got to be able to cast a bunch of spells right away, and the life really adds up. I can see building around it as your commander, but I don't know. I've never just jammed it in a black deck and been like, oh, this is gonna be one of my ramp spells. I don't. Do you play it that way, Krim? Do you just toss it in a black deck and it works out?
My actual mono black deck that I have, first off, I've played it in the 99. I've played it as the commander. As the commander, I often just draw too much hate because of the Storm variant, even though my deck was just demons. So I moved it into the 99 instead, and it's really good there too. So I've just thoroughly enjoyed it, being able to whether it's my demon deck or just my mono black removal tribal deck, being able to play a Phyrexian Obliterator for free, a Bolas Citadel for 3 mana, it's pretty massive. And the life gain, you can get a lot of the life back. You also play with the 6 mana. When you play it as a commander, I have a fair Keurig, and it's the mythic from Zendikar, and it's where landfall you reset your life total to the life you had at a point.
Oh yeah.
Eternal Vessel. So you just pay a ton of life, you Eternal Vessel, and you're back at it again. So I don't know. And all I'm doing is casting like big flying demons, and that's it.
So, yeah, I mean, I think if you build around it, that kind of makes sense. But if I don't know. I would be scared about just jamming it in a random black deck that I was gonna kill myself in pretty quickly.
Seth, I feel like that's because I've seen you kill yourself with greed. That like as in the card greed. I fully believe that yes, you will kill yourself with this.
You also will take 6 off the black market connections every single turn.
Right.
If I'm going to kill myself, it's going to be drawing cards, though. That's the thing. This does technically not draw me.
It helps
any
you
cards.
Your card draw spells.
You only need to pay 1 mana for greed. You just pay 4 life each time.
Yeah, I can cast my greed and Erebos off of it.
Because Keurig, for those that don't know, also it takes it changes the black pips and activated abilities as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're paying 4 for each greed activation.
You would pay that every time. What are you talking about? You know you would.
I might have to pick me up some Eternity Vessels, I guess.
Yeah.
I never considered in my Toshiro deck. I assume this card is only for mono black, right? Like, because you really need stuff with black pips in them. Pips in them. But yeah, maybe I should give it a shot in Toshiro. It is a mono black deck. I never considered it before, so.
Yeah, like the mana reduction is huge. I would rather pay the X amount of life, right? Even just 1 black pip off is huge. It makes things castable off Soul Ring.
I like it. Not bad. All right, we'll move on from black to red, and but it's my turn, I think. Yeah, it's me. So for red cards, surprise to no one, Dockside Extortionist, 2 mana. Make ETB, when it enters the battlefield, you make a treasure for every single artifact and enchantment that your opponents control. So it's typically making anywhere between 4 and like 10 or higher treasure for 2 mana, which I hear is pretty good. And then if you blink it or bounce it or reanimate it or anything with it, it comes with a ham sandwich as well. But if you're not doing all that, it's still one of the best ram cards in the game. Because paying 2 mana, making like 10 is pretty good. So yeah, that's probably on top of everybody's list. But the second one that I like way more is Curse of Opulence. I've been the number 1 Curse of Opulence fan since it was released. It's 1 red for an enchantment or a curse. Enchant player, hopefully Richard because he gets extra salty about it. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, create a gold token. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. So whenever you attack that enchanted poor soul, for 1 mana, you make a gold token. So you could like enchant it and then immediately attack and you get your monies back already. And then also whenever your opponents attack that poor person, they get a gold, so they're incentivized to do it, but you also get a gold. And boy howdy, is it's easy, at least in my experience, and I played in every red deck, in my experience, to get other people to just attack the poor enchanted person because they get a gold, and then you're benefiting more. And also, hey, they're not attacking you, because if they attack you, they don't get a gold. They have to attack the person, so it's like also redirecting damage in a sneaky way, and also making the enchanted person miserable, which I'm kind of turning into a Crim a little bit. It kind of it sparks joy a little bit. I feel a little bit dirty.
Commander players will do anything for a single treasure. That's one thing we've learned. Or a gold token. But that's one thing we've learned. So it really does add up, and you get so much mana out of it for its 1 mana cost.
For 1 mana. So I love this. And then the next one, Jeska's Will, which is also just, Jeska's Will. Basically, it's a 3 mana sorcery. You can choose one of 2 modes, and if you have your commander out when you cast a spell, you could choose both. So mode number 1 is you add red for each card in target opponent's hand. And the second mode is exile top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So either it's card advantage or it's ramp. And with your commander out, it's usually both. So your opponents have to have 1 opponent with 4 or more cards in hand for you to net red off this. But if they have a full 7 or something like that, or even more, with like a Thought Vessel out, this becomes pretty nice ramp. But the main thing is that it does both. And then Mana Geyser, which is the big chungus of rituals. You use 5 mana, and you add 1 red for each tap land your opponents control. You have 3 opponents, so if they all have like 6 lands that are tapped, you make 18 mana. Just bada bing, bada boom, and you're like, good. And then finally, Stormkiln Artist, aka like the red creature that you must kill on site. This is a 4 mana dwarfy dwarf, and what it does is it says it has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you make a treasure token. So if you're in a Spellslinger deck, this is going to be your number 1 mana generator, aka treasure generator. Also, it gets +1/+0 for every single artifact you control, so you could also just randomly one-shot people if they don't have a blocker up. So yeah, that is my list. But Seth, what do you got for us? You got some spicy different choices.
I got
here.
a couple differences. So Dockside number 1, far and away, that's clear. Mana Geyser number 2. I don't know if we're biased a little bit by playing Magic Online, where people tend to tap out more than in paper, but it seems like every time I see a Mana Geyser, it's making like 20 mana and just like so incredibly powerful. Next I have Curse of Opulence. Tomer already talked about that one. People will do anything to make a single gold token. Number 4, Nihab the Eternal, I think is a pretty powerful red ramp spell. 5 mana 4/6, has a flick 3, which doesn't really matter. It's a zombie Minotaur warrior. The big deal is at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you make a red mana for each 1 life that your opponents have lost this turn. So if you can get in a little bit of damage, sling some spells, attack with your creatures, burn your opponents a bit, this can make a lot of mana. And the thing I like about Nihab is it's repeatable. Red is really, really good at this burst mana, but that mana goes away. Jeska's Will, really strong card. I had it on my list initially, but really I play that as much for card draw as I do to be a ramp spell. And as far as actually ramping, like, it's okay, but it's a one shot that's maybe making 3 extra mana most of the time, something like that. So it's good, but I don't know. It's hard for me to think of it as a pure ramp spell. Nihab, I like that you can do it every turn. And then last, I don't know if this is cheating or not, it's technically a colorless card, but this colorless card refers very specifically to red stuff, so you can't really play it in a non-red deck. And that card's Gauntlet of Might, which is a 4-mana artifact that says all red creatures get +1/+1, and all mountains tap for an extra red mana. So essentially this is your Cryptghast for a mono red deck, doing the same thing that Cryptghast does for swamps. It just comes on in artifact. The problem is it's reserve list, and the cheapest version that is not a proxy is like $1,300 or something at the moment. So it is a very, very expensive, inaccessible card in paper. But I love mana doublers. I think mana doublers are some of the most powerful ramp spells, and this one's only 4 mana, which is a pretty good price compared to a lot of mana doublers that we have.
They also kind of made a non-reserve list version of this, Gauntlet of Power, which was in Time Spiral, which was a homage to Gauntlet of Might. 5 mana. You choose the color. So it also gives all creatures of the chosen color +1/+1. And whenever you tap the basic of that chosen color, so it could be mountains, but it could be plains or islands or whatever, then those add an additional of that color.
Isn't there a 6 mana one too that's very similar?
Sun.
Cage Sun, yeah, that's
yeah, but that one is different because it only helps yourself.
Yeah.
So these ones help everybody who's tapping for mountains. But this is by far the cheapest. It's 4 instead of 5 or 6. Yeah, you don't.
But the
see
most
it
expensive in the real world, because unfortunately.
Yeah, I've seen this in the wild a few times when I started playing, but not so much anymore. Proxy's free. Or you could shell out just a mere, I don't know, $300 for a gold border version or something. I don't know. Why would you do
for the collector's edition? Yeah, that's
why would
ridiculous.
Why would? I don't believe in proxies, but I will pay $300 for a proxy.
I will say it's like $1 on Magic Online. So if you're a Moto player, it's super cheap.
Yeah, that's a cool pickup though, because I think most people just don't even know that it exists because it's so expensive. It's kind of like priced out of existence.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, but moving on, Phil, what do you got for us in terms of your top 5?
So my list is pretty similar to Thomas. I have to admit that I did make a change last minute because Seth convinced me that Mana Geyser is probably the better ritual than Jeska's Will, even though Jeska's Will is a stronger card. So my list is Dockside, Curse of Opulence, Mana Geyser, Jeska's Will, and then I have Gauntlet of Might because it rams a bit more conventional than Stormcane Artist, which is absurd, but it only rams with instant sorceries, right? Mm-hmm. So, Gauntlet of Might is a bit easier to ramp with. Thing with Curse of Opulence, maybe it's biased because our play group plays this way and is greedy for gold, but this is just one mana do crit, get like 15 mana or something over the game. It really people died because of this. Like literally 1 gold every turn. Everybody wants it, and you get 1/2. I mean, it does ramp your opponents as well, which is why it's on second place here. But it's just I hate this card, by the way. It's not like I just hate that that's good. Like just like Dockside, although Dockside at least.
There's no upside
another
to Dark.
Player. You literally curse somebody with Curse of
feel
Opulence.
Bad for
they
everybody.
Are gonna die.
Yeah, it's feel bad for everybody except Curse of Opulence. It's feel bad for one person in particular.
Oh,
so
bad.
I want the new flavor text to be people died because of this. That's just the Curse of Opulence flavor text.
Yeah,
I love it so much.
Yeah, pretty similar to Thomas' list in the end.
All right, I spotted some new cards on Crims though.
So I have some differences between all their lists. I have obviously Dockside, Jeska's Will, Mana Geyser, but a few that I have is I really like Runaway Steamkin in a mono red deck because every time you cast, it's a 1 and a red. It's a 1/1 elemental. Whenever you cast a red spell, add a counter on it. Then when you remove 3 counters, you can add 3 red mana, which. On its own, you can probably just keep going, right? Depending on the kind of deck you're playing. This is probably more like combo-eccentric kind of play style, but it is a really good way to just keep generating mana for every spell you play. I like that. And then lastly, this card is super niche, but it does do a lot of work in the right deck. It's Braid of Fire, 1 and a red. It's an enchantment. Cumulative upkeep, add a red to your mana pool. That's right. So usually you're often spending mana into cumulative upkeep or doing something to keep it around. This one, you just add a red mana in your upkeep. Of course, as the phases change, the mana leaves. So if your commander is something like, let's say Purphoros, like Bronze Blooded, you can get a lot of mana on your upkeep and just starting to get free activations or some fire breathing effect, like whatever the 6 mana uncounterable dragon. That fire breathes. Eventually, if your deck is loaded with like any kind of like activated abilities, I think this card is really good in there. So like if I had like an Olivia, a Voldaren deck, right? This helps me start pinging a ton of things down. So, and then turning them into vampires, of course. So like it's really good in the right deck because you're just adding more red mana in your upkeep every time.
Yeah, it's got a really cool text.
Yeah.
Very hard to use. You do have to be in the right deck, but in the right deck, it's really strong. You can also cast instants with it. Like you can build up and cast a big, Comet Storm or something at instant speed. So that's another thing you can do. Electro-Dominance. Also, mentioning Steamkin reminded me of Burgi. I think Burgi also was like just outside of my top 5. It does something similar. When you cast a spell, you get a red mana. So it kind of makes all your spells 1 mana cheaper. Doesn't store up in the same way as Steamkin, but you often see them in the same decks together, where if you're slinging a bunch of red spells, they both are helping you have these big combo-ish style of turns, really.
Yeah, they do the same thing. Steamkin's just better at like storing it for the next turns.
It doesn't draw as much aggro as a Burgi does. Burgi is like, oh, we got to kill you or the Burgi.
Yeah, because it's like you can use it the other side too. She has the flexibility of if you want ramp, you use her on the front side. If you want card advantage, you flip her over to the backside, and you can discard cards to exile 2 cards, or impulse draw 2 cards, I guess. I also wanted to give a shout out to another one. I like a lot of the red options, honestly. I didn't realize how much I liked it. But there's one that I feel is kind of underrated, and that's Koth of the Hammer. It's a 4 mana planeswalker. It has a +1 ability. You can untap a mountain. It becomes a 4/4 elemental creature until end of turn, which is like very much like a Nissa type ability these days.
Yep.
But it's like very much reminds me of like a Garruk or a Nissa where you untap one land. So it's ramping you on land, which is not that impressive on itself for a 4-drop Planeswalker. But its -2 is you add 1 red to your mana pool for each mountain you control, which is like a souped up High Tide in a sense. Unless you're like untapping your lanes, like turnabouting your lanes and stuff, in islands. Like this is just like you can drop a Koth and then immediately -2 him and then make, like 6+ mana and like a mono red deck or something like that. And, that's super fun. I like Koth as well.
I love Koth. Koth's one of my favorite planeswalkers. Also, Red has 2 of the mana rocks that are 3 mana with enough upside that they're worth considering, which Curse Mirror, 3 mana, makes a red. ETBs as a creature on the battlefield with haste, so it's like a mana rock that gives you a temporary creature that can deal some damage. And then the newest one is Glittering Stockpile, which taps to add a red mana and puts a stash counter on itself, and then eventually you can sacrifice it and make mana equal to the number of stash counters on it. So it's a 1 mana every turn, and then eventually it's storing up to make a big amount of mana, which is kind of cool for Red, because Red has these big bursts of mana, and this kind of gives you a consistent mana rock that also eventually gives you that big ritual style effect. So I don't think those are quite staple level, but I think they're 3 mana mana rocks with enough upside that I at least consider them if my deck is like on theme or whatever, and they do something with what I'm trying to build with for the week.
Yeah, I like those a bunch as well. Curse Mirror is like, it was under the radar for a long time, but then Mirim showed up and people started respecting it a lot more.
Yeah.
It went up to like $7 or $10 now, but yeah, it's a good card. Like you just could copy an Eternal Witness or something on the battlefield and get value out of it all the time. So I don't think it's available online.
You don't have to control the card, right? It is.
Yeah, no, it's any creature
online.
on the battlefield. Enters the battlefield, you may have it copy any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, and it has haste. So you copy the biggest thing and you just smash, or you just copy something with an ETB trigger and you smash that, or you like Astral Dragon combo off and win. So cool card. All right, moving on. Seth, green. Take us home.
The best
with
ramp
green
color. Here we go. So green, the hard part about green, some of the colors we've talked about so far, the challenge was finding enough good options. Green, it's kind of the opposite. There's so many busted ramp options. It's hard to narrow it down to top 5. What I have is, number 1, Nature's Lore 3 visits. Essentially the same card, 2 mana sorcery. You get to tutor up a forest, put it on the battlefield, untap. So kind of only costs 1 mana since it's coming into play untap. Number 2, Kodama's Reach, cultivate 3 mana sorceries. You search for 2 basic lands. 1 go on the battlefield, the other one goes into your hand. One of them is Arcane, Kodama's Reach, which I guess is the slight twist, although that's very rarely relevant in practice. The Great Henge coming in at number 3. It costs 1 million mana, 9 mana, but it gets cheaper based on the power of creatures you have on the battlefield. Once you get it down, it's very good. It taps for 2 green mana. When a creature comes into play, a non-token creature, you get to draw a card and you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So ramp, card draw, and growing your creatures. Number 4, Farseek. Tutor up a non-forest land, essentially, onto the battlefield. Very good because it snags triomes, not non-forest land, mountain, plain, swamp, or island, I guess, technically, because your triome can have a mountain in its type, but it can't only be a mountain. But it grabs triomes, it grabs shocklands, stuff like that. And then number 5, a huge list of 1 mana mana dorks. Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves, all just 1 mana, 1/1s make a green mana. Birds of Paradise, 1 mana, 0/1 flying, tapped for any color of mana. So that's my ranking. I have like 10 cards in my top 5 somehow.
That sounds about right, honestly. No, also don't put Farseek in your mono green deck.
Yeah.
Yes. No. That's where it's bad.
Yeah. Phil, what do you got for us?
My list looks very similar in the beginning. Like I do have Nature's Law and 3 visits on pretty much undisputed 1 for me, because that's like, I play with them in every green deck, and I love that they get forests, which it's just so flexible to get a triome. I mean, in this case it's tapped, but man, they are just so good. Then we have Kodama's Reach and Cultivate, a bit of card advantage included, and ramp, although 3 mana is a bit expensive, considering that the next card is probably for some people That's the best one. Gaia's Cradle. It's a land that does nothing unless you have creatures. Then it taps for green for each creature you control, which is why I wouldn't say it's not strong, but I kind of don't like the card too much. It's obviously super broken if you have a bunch of creatures, but I'd rather play Nature's Law in most green decks. It's obviously Gaia's Cradle is insanely broken, but it doesn't. Nature's Law doesn't have a fail case. You just always get the cards, and Gaia's Cradle after a board wipe looks bad. Yeah, the ceiling is insane. The card costs thousands of times as you would pay for a Cultivate or something. So yeah, you take that for what you will. Sakura Tribe Elder on 4, which I guess I have over Farseek here if we compare it to Seth's list. Honestly, Farseek, Rampant Growth, Sakura Tribe Elder, it's all these 2 mana, get a tapped land. I like that it's stapled to a creature because you can jump block with it, sacrifice in response, it gets a clue with Lowness, for example. It just
Tile Tracker.
Yeah, there's a lot of upside in it being a creature with this ability. You can recur it from the graveyard. And then, I didn't write out all the names, but number 5 is Mana Dogs of all kinds. Just make sure they cost 1 mana, unless it's like some niche thing that's better. Which 2 mana? Is there a 2 mana dog that is played?
Paradise Druid, sometimes.
I think
2 mana. The Blossoms. It's the one it taps for 1 of each color that you control.
Tender Bloom.
Forget its name.
Bloom Tender. Yeah,
Bloom Tender.
Bloom Tender.
Correct. Yeah, this one's
the
pretty
one.
good. Yeah. Okay. So I guess Mana Dogs and Bloom Tender on 6 or something.
Yeah. Crim.
Crim's
We got
list is wild.
Some differences.
Yeah, way
Yeah.
different than ours.
Heck yeah.
Apparently, I'm playing 2009 Magic over here.
Boomer Magic.
My number 1 is still Oracle of Moldiah. This is 3 and a green, Elf Shaman 2/2. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Play with the top of your library revealed. You may play lands from the top of your library. Is this not good anymore? I think this card is still absurd. Like,
I think it's great.
Yeah, like this card still feels like it is just. I mean, yeah, it's not always guaranteed to be ramp, but like the fact that I'm also like deck thinning, getting the lands off the top of my deck, able to like kind of get information on what my next draw is. So maybe I need to crack a fetch land or something like that. That's pretty good. So I don't know. I like this. This is a bit of ramp / deck manipulation. So I think this is still a very good card in green because if it resolves, you automatically get that additional land. And I mean, this card probably is in the same. Actually, I think this is better than Azusa because Azusa, once you're hellbent, you're not doing anything, right? But Oracle allows you to play off the top of your deck when you're out of lands in hand. So I still really like this card.
I still like Oracle too, although I usually play it in like landfall decks. It's not. I don't know. If I'm just building a generic deck, I usually focus on stuff that doesn't die to removal, which I think is the big power of like green ramp in general and of like 3 visits and Kadama's Reach is usually your lands don't get messed with. So those are why I would have them at like a higher tier, I think, than something like Oracle.
The lands don't get messed with, which is fair, which I think should be a different topic on its own. But I think that though the lands don't get messed with, if Oracle resolves, it's already another land, right? Like assuming you don't have one,
if you
Especially
have
if there's one off the top of
Yeah.
your library.
which you could choose, right? And then that way you get to hold something in your hand instead. So assuming that this resolves, is it not already another land? I don't see why this is just not better.
But it is like Nature's Law is another land for half the cost. And if the Oracle of Moldiah dies, it's almost the same.
That's the thing. It's awkward because
it's turn 2 though.
Turn 2 is good,
Nature's Law.
but I'm assuming green decks already like I won't say like 3 visits and Nature's Lore isn't like good. Obviously those are good cards, but I assume that a 4 mana card is really just a 3 mana card or a 2 mana, like you know what I mean, like for a green deck. So this is something where if they remove it, it's just a 2/2. Like you can remove it, that's fine, but are you really going to remove this 2/2 as opposed to I don't know somebody threatening to drop their commander or like an actual like threat, because this is oddly in that spot where it's offensive enough in that it helps ramp, it really does deck manipulate, but it's not strong enough to draw the ire of like fully.
It would draw your ire, Krim.
It
Don't
would draw
you
mine.
lie to me.
It would
play
draw
this,
mine.
you would snap counter it in an
I
instant.
mean, yeah, Crim.
Oh,
in an
I
instant.
the average person would not, or maybe they do. Maybe they do.
I'd respect the crap out of this. This is both card advantage and ramp rolled together.
Yeah,
But
that's
if we're
why
gonna
I love that.
If
Yeah.
we're going to count Oracle as a 3-drop because it's green, isn't the reason why we're counting it as a 3-drop because you have better cards like Nature's Lore and 3 Visits in your deck, so you can
That's
cast
a
it a turn
4-drop.
early?
Yeah,
I think it's
that's
a 4
fair.
drop, but it immediately gets value.
Right, like even casting this on 4, if I cast this on 3 or any earlier, it's absurd, right? But then if I cast it on 4, I still love it. Like I don't see a phase where I don't want it, right?
I like Oracle. I just don't think it's better than Nature's Lore or like Cultivate or whatever.
And
I
then
put it on my list because I forgot it existed. I thought it was just really expensive for a long time, so I just never played with
used
it.
to be, but then it got reprinted a few times. Now it's like probably like $5 or something.
It's like $10 now. It's
Yeah,
not too bad.
$10. It used to be like $30+, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and then I just did not think about it.
And then up next, I think, although I rank Oracle of Moldiah higher up, I do think that the biggest draw to green is Mana Dorks. Like I know you have all the Nature's Lore and things like that, but like, oh my god, green has some of the best Mana Dorks. They have the best Mana Dorks. And like the mixture of colors that they can add, Birds of Paradise, like, I don't know, this is like green, right? Like this is very green. Llanowar Elves, things like that. And then, I mean, it's like a Nature's Lore and 3 Visits. So I have Sky Shroud Claim, which is 4 mana, search your library for up to 2 forest cards, put them onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. It's like 2 Nature's Claims. It's stapled into 1 card. I think this card is still really good. It's probably the best 4 mana explosive vegetation style card. And then I have Nyx Bloom Ancient. This has to be ramp. I know it's 7 mana, but like, holy cow, is this thing ramp, right? It's 4 and green, 5/5. Trample. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times that mana instead. So a mana rock, Soul Ring makes 6 mana. So I don't know. This card has to be ramp, right? And this card, I'm surprised not more people have it on their list, because I think this card is absurd. This is a must kill.
It's 7 mana.
This is a
You have to ramp
7
into
mana.
it.
7 mana is not a real, like, legitimately everything is free in green. Everything's free in green. Like there's zero, like, you don't, like, ignore the top right of the text box.
Yeah.
Magic cards do not care if they are in green. So I genuinely think that if you were even able to get this out on turn 5, like, again, though it is 7 mana, usually, oftentimes, late game ramp is not great, right? Unless it was designed after 2018. So, being a card designed after 2018, it's always good. Because on turn 7, for 7, if I untap with this, you're probably going to lose. That's the main reason why I hate Nissa. Nissa, Who Shakes the World, doubles mana, doubles green mana. So this does 1 farther. This triples that mana. So I don't think this is bad at any phase.
I like Nyx Bloom a lot, but I think of it more of as a finisher personally than a ramp spell. Like, I'm usually playing it to try to win the game with it rather than to ramp into something else. I'm usually trying to ramp into my Nyx Bloom, and then my Nyx Bloom wins me the game with the amount of mana that it makes. So I think that's why it's not on my list, even though it is one of my favorite cards. I love Nyx Bloom Ancient, and I've done some really sweet things with it.
I'm
like
still losing from it.
Yeah, you're
So,
still losing from that huge pump
infinite
spell. So.
damage.
Infinite damage, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that it's fair? I could see that it is like a combo piece, but even fairly casted without like going off, like, I'm now about like to play everything ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, triple
it
mana
needs to
is
be
kind of
removed before you
absurd.
untap if you're playing it fairly.
Right. And then, of course, lastly, I have Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, which I think should actually be Nature's Lore 3 Visits. which I would hire. I would rank it. Yeah, you know what? I'm changing it. It's Nature's
Changing it.
Lore and 3 visits, with just Cultivate Kodama's Reach being number 6. Because again, how efficient green is and the things that green has. Unfortunately, Kodama's Reach and Cultivate just don't make the top 5.
It's interesting because I think the biggest backlash we would be getting to this entire list would probably be Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. I view it very highly too. I didn't put it in my top 5, but I would put it as number 6.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of the community is like, oh, these cards are overrated, just like Solemn. But like, I don't know. Pay 3 mana, put a land into your hand so you get your next land drop, and you ramp. I don't know.
I still
like that a
value
lot.
Sky Shroud Claim over those, by the way, because
That's fair.
Sky Shroud Claim would get me 2 forest types and puts them into
learned-
play.
And
Get 2
untapped.
triumphs.
Yeah.
Prim really loves expensive ramp. I think that's the biggest difference between our takes on ramp is I really value the efficiency of hopefully spending like turn 2 or turn 3 ramping when you seem more okay with the like turn 4 plus ramp spells, which are super powerful, but maybe it's just different philosophies when it comes to building green decks and Commander.
When it comes to Fork mana ramp, there's number 6 on my list, a card that I try to include in every deck, but I wouldn't call it top 5. Tempt with Discovery.
Yeah.
So you tutor any land, not just any basic land type, and then any opponent can also get one, but for every land they get, you also get a land, so in the end, everybody's happy, right? Usually that just ends up with me having insane utility lands on the battlefield, but people aren't as salty about it, I guess.
I love
Considering
that
you
card.
just
'Cause you
ramp
gave
4
them
lands.
something.
Yeah,
See,
like Tempt with Discovery is actually maybe it's just me because I have very good experiences with the card. It's just so good, and it tutors any land you can get.
I think Tempt is
Relatively
also very
tower.
good. Yeah.
The floor is you get any land and put it directly onto the battlefield, and then the ceiling is you get 4 of any lands and put it onto the battlefield. And some people just do that, but like it really depends on the play group. Like I've seen it happen more often than not. Like it's either you get 1 or you get 4, and almost always it's 4 because it's like the first person will be like, well, I'm going to get it, and then the other people are going to be like, well, if he got it, I don't want to be behind, so I'm going to get something too.
Only one person needs to bite, and then the whole
Only
table.
one person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
That
you get
sounds
4
like-
lands.
Sounds like Ristic Study. Do you hate Tempt with Discovery, Tomer, like Ristic Study? Because I
No,
know
because-
I'm taking the land.
Because
And then everyone else
it just
will.
happens and that's it. Ristic is
Okay.
do you pay the 1? Do you pay the
Yeah.
1? Do you pay the 1 for that? And just for the rest of the game until you flip the table. This one is just one and done. So just rip that Band-Aid off. Just take those 4 lands,
Get
all
it
right?
just with.
Yeah, just get those. Take those 4 lands, all right?
Just win. just win
win.
already. You got it.
And your Dark Depths, the thespian stage, whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. All right, for my list to finish things up, I put Gaia's Cradle at number 1. Y'all are sleeping on Gaia's Cradle, and it shows.
It's
You
just
banned us
I
from
just
playing
don't
it,
consider it
Tomer.
a real card.
I know because it's so
expensive.
good. Yeah,
That's why we don't consider it.
anytime I play with Vince on EDH and Chill, you know he's playing green and he's running
yeah.
Gaia's Cradle. And I have all the respect for that because I actually see it in the wild and stuff. Like, yeah, you need to have creatures for it to tap for mana. Good thing you're in green. The color of creatures. Like, yeah, obviously. So, yeah, sometimes we'll tap for 0, boo-hoo, but like, yeah, usually it's 1, but more likely it's like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're an elf ball, it's 20, and then you win. So I consider that the best because it can come out early and it can be your Nyxbloom Ancient later on or whatever. It does both. And then Nature's Lore for 3 visits. I value early ramp. It enters battlefield untapped and it gets duels. Mana Dorks, turn 1 ramp. It's very good. Even better than turn 2 ramp, turns out. They died to board wipes and stuff, but like, okay, whatever. I still got my value out of it for like the first 3 turns of the game, which is the most crucial. And then, you can turn them into like, you can like draw cards off them off Toski or whatever once they've stayed their welcome. Sakura Tribelter, it's like just a better rampant growth because it's a creature. and it's sacrifices, so you just get extra synergy potential. And then Oracle Moldiah, I just threw it in there because Krim just reminded me of how good this is. This is like one of my favorite green cards. And I just forgot about the card entirely because I just assumed it was like $30+, and I usually bring budget decks. And it does get better with like fetch lands and stuff. But even without fetch lands, like you have a bunch of green ramp spells, so you're going to be shuffling as well. So I think it's just good. It's just a good card. Yeah, I like it. But we're pretty close, I guess. We have some key differences, but we all agree like Nature's Lore through Viz is good, Mana Dorks are good, Skura Tribe Elder.
I mean, honestly, I think we all agree that Gaia's Cradle is insanely good. I just thought
no one is going to argue that. Like, yeah. I mean, it's no shit
it's a bit
gorge,
like Wizard in Blue,
but it is good. But it's good.
I think the strongest of the cycle.
Yeah.
I think of it like Nyx Bloom Ancient a little bit, where it's like the big finisher that's like winning me the game rather than like the early game ramp spell that's like accelerating me into the finisher.
You haven't seen like a turn 3 Cradle tap for like 2+?
I mean, that's not bad, I guess. You built an Ancient Tomb, I guess.
It's like that's better than Nature's Lore, I think.
All right, hot take to end. Mana Dorks are super overrated. They just
you put them in number 5.
Well, yeah, but my list had like 10 cards, so that's why. My top one was like 2, and yeah, but they're overrated. They're not bad, but my belief with Mana Dorks is you need to have a reason to play them, and you shouldn't just play them in most decks. You got to have your Edric or your Tosk. You got to have like something you're doing with Mana Dorks other than ramping. Otherwise, just play your 3 visits and Nature's Lures and Kadama's Reach and whatnot. Stuff that doesn't get wrathed away, since no one's allowed to play Armageddon in Commander. That's one of the unwritten rules. You cannot touch my lands, but you can touch my Mana Dorks.
My hot take is they're underrated. I'll hot take you. They're underrated. You should not be. You should be running them over your rampant growth and stuff if you're in a creature heavy deck or a creature focused deck, because green's the best color for supporting creatures. So you got your Beast Whisperer, you got your Guardian Project, you got your Toskies, so you're drawing cards off your creatures, and then also you're making more mana off your Gaia's Cradle, and then also you're drawing more cards of like Shamanic Revelation, and you can turn them into all mana. Well, they're already Mana Dorks, but you can turn them into card draw, turn them to additional ramp, and also turn them into finishers with stuff like Craterhoof. Yep. So like they have so much more synergy than a rampant growth in your typical green deck. I think they're worse if you don't have synergy, but you're in green. Of course you have creature synergy. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, are you not running these good cards in green?
How much synergy do they have when they're sitting in your graveyard and you're stuck with 2 lands because you invested in a bunch of Llanowar Elves that got wrathed away?
I still drew my card off Beast Whisperer and stuff. I'm
not saying replace all your lands for Mana Dorks either, but I am going to say that I agree with Tomer that like these are probably underutilized because, again, you can't Nature's Lore on 1. There's a lot of 1-drop Mana Dorks that can allow you to play a turn 2 3-drop, like a Kodama's Reach or a Cultivate, and then gets you even farther ahead. So by the time the board wipe comes in, it's like, cool, you blew up my Mana Dorks, but they've already served their purpose, right? Like, they've already pulled me far ahead, and we got a board wipe out of it. So I don't mind. Sure.
Whenever I hear a take like this from Krim, I always wonder, is this just him playing the long con and trying to beat me to play into his wraths?
Is that why he values high ramp? Because that means he'll have his counter magic ready for it?
No. You see, I'm secretly trying to spike everyone's minds into thinking, yes, play the 4-drops so I can do my things first.
No, it's so Krim can flash in a opposition agent. That's why all them cost.
All of these get got.
My god, that's it. Nature's Lore's too fast for the opposition agents. So Krim's gotta get us to play the Sky Shroud claim.
This is
he
like
gets more value out of a Sky Shroud claim than the Nature's Lore anyway, right?
That's true, yeah.
I mean, let's be honest here, okay? I think this is some definitely shuffler truther depth, like tinfoil hat stuff. But yeah. You think I think that far ahead? Jesus.
I'm Krim on Mana Dorks. I think they're legit.
Mana Dorks are why I'm upset at green.
Don't be so afraid that there's a board wipe going to happen. If you have a lot of creature synergies and you're in green, so you do, or just have a healthy mix. You could have 4 Mana Dorks. Yeah, you could have 4 Mana Dorks and 4
both.
ramp cards, and then so a couple of them died. Whatever. I still got my turn 1 ramp, and I casted a 3-drop on turn 2. That's good. Then it can die. Fine, whatever. It's like a ritual, except a better ritual. So, I don't know. But why? What's up? Why do you think they're overrated?
Because they just die too often. I feel like I
Everything
feel like
dies,
you have so many options to put
lesson.
lands into play, and there's just that unwritten rule that you can't mess with people's lands in Commander, so you might as well take full advantage of it. Like, as far as I can tell, that's the biggest reason green is overpowered, is because green is a color that can ramp with lands, and because Commander has the unwritten rule that you can't mess with people's lands, so green just gets to go ham with all these land ramp effects. So for me, I want to take full advantage of that. Not that mana dorks are bad, and if I'm playing Edric or I'm like build around Toski effects, they're fine, they're not bad, but I feel like for most decks, you're giving up your biggest competitive advantage if you're ramping with things that die. If you have the option to ramp with things that literally they will kick you out of your play group if you mess with, like, that's how harsh people take messing with lands. You can't rat them away because people get so salty about it.
You know what? I think what I'm taking from this is that we should play mana dorks to expedite to Cataclysm. And then after you Cataclysm / Armageddon, again, Fortnite cards are in Magic, you floss on the table and you get ready for a new group because you might not come back to that one.
Well,
but the thing here is you proved a point.
You give your mana. So after you've blown up all the lands, right, and you have these mana dorks on the table, you cast Triumph from the Horde with a new secret lair Fortnite.
Oh yeah,
version.
then you really
and you have
floss on
infect
them.
creatures. Oh boy. Yeah,
Oh.
I'm just like,
Look,
embrace,
if I'm getting
embrace
kicked out
the
of a
board
play
wipe.
group, I'm doing it that way, right there. Blow up the lands, swing in with Triumph of the Hordes, mana dorks, floss. See y'all later.
Out of here.
Dab. Yeah.
You think I'm kidding, but I'm like one more green card away from just playing Armageddon, like normally.
All right. So we covered green, we covered red, we covered black, blue, and white, and honorable mentions to the colorless cards that pretty much show up in most decks, or at least the non-green ones. That's basically our personal preference. Obviously, these are the ones that we go to outside of the artifacts, the colorless options. But as always, let us know what you feel are your top 5 for each respective color. And also, for people who play CDH, I know that the meta is very different from what we play and what we prefer based on that. So if you're a CDH player and you're familiar with the metagame, maybe give us your insight on what are the top mana ramp cards in your CDH tables as well. Love to hear from that. As always, thanks so much for watching or listening, more likely listening. And until next time, friends, we'll be back next week. See ya!